What's up, boys? Welcome back to a new Is It Imba or Do I Suck? Today we have Exodus, who will be taking on Ward Runa in today's match. Now let's start by reading his email. It's very short, it's powerful. They bunker up very hard with tanks and 20 turrets while constantly dropping with bio that beats every single goddamn unit you can warp in with a warp gate. No skill needed. Delete TERRAN, please. So, rather short but extremely powerful. And let's see how much of that is actually true. So the problem here is the power of TERRAN turtling, I guess, rather than anything else. So I'm curious to see what Ward Runa. I'm expecting some tanks, some planetaries, some bunkers. And from Exodus I'm expecting some good decision making, but in the end him getting defeated by absolute imbalance. That really seems to be the only logical conclusion after reading this description. So they're opening up with a standard gateway first, going into a gateway scout. This all looks exactly the way I would want it to look. As on the other hand we have Ward Runa opening up with, looks a lot like just a barracks first. We'll be going into a gas afterwards. One gate expand from Exodus, who forgets to build his 20th probe, but I can live with that. 19 cybercore isn't terrible, it's just slightly worse. Now the opponent Ward Runa will be opening up with a second depot. And Exodus does not realize that there is no natural base. This could be a little bit of a tell that there's most likely a weird one base play happening or something rather aggressive. If you see the second depot before the command center. Second gas is going down for Ward Runa, so curious to see what will come out of that. Now let's first take a look at this Sim City. This is not exactly how you want to be doing it. You always want to be walling either this area or you want to be walling off the Reaper area. You especially don't want to put two pylons next to each other. First pylon should probably be in the main, second pylon on the low ground, either for a wall or in your main to spot a certain area of your base. As especially the first 3-4 pylons should be used mainly for spotting and blocking of areas, instead of powering your first two structures that are never gonna get depowered anyway. So first probe dies to a Reaper, shouldn't really happen, but because of this poor Sim City it does happen. But once again I can kind of live with that. At the same time we see Exodus has figured out that this command center is about 40 to 45 seconds late. He scouts that this is most likely, I'm guessing, a Hellion opener or perhaps a reactored Hellion opener. But he doesn't have a pylon here, so building a wall will be very difficult. It might, come back to haunt him later on. Doesn't actually seem to be wanting to switch those buildings, no? Oh, no Hellions. Instead we see 2 Marines and a tech lab starting, so perhaps straight into tank or a Cyclone. Bunker will be going down. This probe actually is putting in some work. Meanwhile this Stalker killed the Reaper, as we can see. So good trade so far in the early game for Exodus, who is going into a robotics facility and into a pylon that is a bit too early. On top of that he's floating 400 minerals and there's almost no probe production. Most of the time when you play a robo opener you want to add 2 gateways at around 310, 315. You want to get 3 gate units most likely, Adept Stalker Sentry or Stalker Stalker Sentry. I'm not a massive fan of only getting 2 gateway units, and these gates are too late. You want to really line them up together with your warp gate finishing, or at least a bit closer than what this is. I like that the first Adept is being chrono boosted. I wouldn't mind seeing a second Adept being built immediately after as well. But that doesn't really seem to be in the works here. Twilight Council at this timing is very odd. You either build it before your gates or you build it before your robo, but going 3 gate robo then Twilight Council into a single gas at this point is very odd. Most of the time when you play like this you'd also get a 3rd base as soon as possible, but we're not seeing that either. So a very weird build order that I really haven't seen before. But on the other hand the TERRAN also is playing some, let's call it interesting for the sake of it, an interesting build order. He's down 11 workers because his command center was so late. He's building a blind turret, a bunker, tank, eBay in the wall. His starport is, well, a little bit too late. So I'm curious to see what he will be going into. Now, getting an immortal. Oh, losing an observer to a turret is a very special move as well that I wouldn't recommend. But building an immortal you usually only do if you're afraid of a push within the next 30 seconds or so. Immortals are not units you want to build early on. You want to be going faster into Colossus. Same with Stalkers, really. You don't want to get too many Stalkers early on, as they don't do a lot of damage, they don't do well in fights. This blink is very late. Third base is very late. There is no Forge yet. And there is an Immortal without any Sentry. So I'm not really liking the unit composition here, but on the other hand, I'm also not liking the build order or the unit composition of the Terran. So we're still in okay territory at this point, I believe. Even though the Forge really is getting quite late at this point. And I wouldn't mind seeing one being thrown down. As we have Combat Shield and Stim being researched. Third base on the way for both players right now. And really not that much is happening, so this kind of feels okay for the toss. His vision is, well, I think terrible would be the correct word to describe it. He's blind in front of his opponent's base, he's blind in front of his own base. He really only sees one angle, and of course that's the one angle our opponent is dropping from. So he does get lucky by spotting this medevac, but I'm afraid his eyes didn't see it. The observer did, but he didn't really notice it, which means this medevac with Stim and Combat Shield Marines will be able to get into the main base as a Liberator goes into the natural. Now, with Blink Finish this should be relatively easy to deal with. Just blink under it, get the medevac. Meanwhile you pull the probe so you don't lose too many workers. 7 workers is a little much, but you know, the other things were happening, so I can still kind of live with it. Once again, the Stalker count is way too high. Unless you're getting Colossus, you really don't want to increase your Stalker count past 6 or 7 majority of the time, especially not in the early game, because they're taking away from units that actually do damage, like Zealots or a Sentry or perhaps Templar. Like you want to spend your gas somewhere else, even though for whatever reason Exodus is floating 600 gas. I'm not quite sure how he managed to do that. I guess the complete lack of upgrades or any tag past anything very primitive like the Twilight will do that. Never quite seen something like that. Only the single observer. Of course, it's more common to have 3 or 4 observers, which they do kind of eat gas. There's only a single sentry instead of the more common 2 or 3. So at this point, Exodus is kind of behind. I mean, he lost 14 workers to the harassment. Sure, he did kill a medevac, but his opponent is even in workers and actually built the planetary on the third base. Oh, this looks fantastic. I think I'm gonna enjoy this one very much. So the way Exodus would want to play is probe this up as quickly as possible, get some decent upgrades, and from that point on just go into a fourth base, get some real tech going, either Templar Archives or Storm or a Robo Bay. Instead we see double Stargate. The reason I laugh is because this is absolutely terrible. You need some kind of AoE in your army. Like you need either Storm or Colossus or even Disruptors to deal with Bio. You're just going to get absolutely destroyed in a straight up fight. Now already by just pure Marine Marauder, but especially once Ghosts are out. Like you need Splash. You can't beat Terran without Splash. It's impossible. Their units are just better than our ground units. Especially the more they get. On top of that, Exodus still hasn't started a single forge. Don't forget, the standard timing for a forge is about 5 minutes in. Right now we're 9 minutes in, and we're still looking at 0 upgrades. The Terran, however, 2-1 on the way, loads up 4 dropships, and we'll be heading across the map in a 2-2 split. Now, once again, we see our boy Exodus is practically blind. Like, I don't want to call him a mole, but he is sharing some characteristics and that he can't really see anything at this point. He's a little bit in front of his opponents. He's an SCV moving towards the fourth base. He is aware there's a planetary on the third, but he isn't really aware of anything else. So anything could be happening at any point and he wouldn't really know. If he magically finds this, I'd be very disappointed in this game. But he doesn't. Now we do have this observer spotting this drop. Let's see if Exodus responds. No. Sees it flying in vision, takes him. Instead is going for the Marine that got spotted with the hallucination. So Exodus right now realizes there's 2 drops heading into both of his bases. His response is to throw down 2 forges, pull away all the probes towards the middle of the map. And I guess run into the main base where the least amount of units is. It's an interesting response. Oh, actually, nicely splits off. Loses the third base, loses the natural, and does manage to clean up the main without really losing anything of significance. So even though this was really bad, the main takeaway I got from the past half a minute is that he finally started his forges. So even though the game is practically over at this point, I'm still kind of happy that at least he realized he really needed upgrades. So it's progress of a kind as well. Now, while I was discussing his complete lack of map vision, he managed to throw down a fleet beacon and go straight into Tempest. Now, if there's anything that's bad against pure Marine Marauder, it would have to be Tempest. If there's no AoE. Like Tempest are useful against Vikings perhaps, and mainly against Liberators is when you want to be getting them. But also again, for example, if you play Colossus Storm and he gets Viking Ghost, it's nice to have a couple of Tempests so you can deal with the Vikings before the fight. You can zone him out with your Storms at the same time. But this is really the weirdest style I've seen in my life. Pure gateway units without upgrades into Tempest. It just sounds bad already. Like the only power that gateway units usually have is their upgrades, and that's the one thing he's just not getting. He did build double forges, but instead of using those, he decided to get 2 Tempest, which he also cancelled then, I guess to restart the next side. I have to admit, I'm not quite seeing the imbalance part yet, but I'm sure it's on the way now. Anytime we will start seeing the Terran like start playing way worse than Exodus and not deserve this game. 3-2 meanwhile on the way for the Terran, who, all things considered, is playing a pretty decent game. You know, he's getting his paces. I'm not a massive fan of the Planetary on the third, but, you know, he's safe. He probably died a few too many times to Protoss all in. So it's like, you know what, never again. I'm just going to get tanks and drop behind my tanks, my Planetary, while I macro up. It's completely fair. He's getting a sensor tower, Ghost Academy. Meanwhile, our boy Exodus. Let's take a look at his vision. So he sees a little bit here on the map. And he still really has good vision on this right side. So I'd say percentage-wise, he's seeing about 15, maybe 12 to 15% of the map right now. Now the Terran has a little more vision already. And on top of that has the sensor towers and has a good defensive setup. So he doesn't need to see as much, of course. It would be nice, but as most of the time the Terran is the aggressor and Exodus really is the defender in this game, as he hasn't really moved past this area, except for clearing that one Marine while getting dropped in 2 sides. I feel like getting some extra vision, maybe a Zealot here, a Pylon over here, a Zealot here, maybe another Zealot here, could really create a nice ring around your base for vision. Now, we do have the 2 drops moving in, completely shift queued, and we see Exodus actually responding for once. He should be able to clear this up relatively easily, as he has about 12 Blink Stalkers here. Now, these units, of course, are better upgraded, but this was a good catch. I'm not gonna complain about this. This was good, and he's also pre-splitting his army as he saw another force moving towards his third, and he starts his 1-1. Now we're making progress. 13 minutes in game. We have our 1-1 on the way. It's not great, but it is definitely doable. It's always nice to see well upgraded units against not upgraded units. It's like 5 units against 8 Zealots with charge. Like, this should not look that way, you know. Not a single Zealot should have any damage, basically. 2 Tempests do get started again. 2200 gas in the bank. Still no Storm on the way. No Templar Archives even on the way. Decides to stop mining with a big part of his probes as well. He pulled them away about a minute ago once these dropped arrived in here, and then forgot to put them back to mining. But I mean, he has plenty of money in the bank, so I guess he doesn't really see the urgency in that right now. Would make sense. Would make sense. Will he continue his famous Tempest production? No, just 2 Stargates for 2 Tempests. No, starts 2 more. Perhaps time for a fort base at some point, as his main is starting to run out. Well, his natural has barely been mined from, even though he built it at the 3-minute mark, or the 2-minute mark. For some reason there's still the patches, because he's barely been mining. Now, 2 Liberators at the same time, it's a bit too much to handle, so getting a bunch of kills each once again. Terran meanwhile expanding to his 5th base, getting ship weapons, level 2. And increasing the Viking count as well as Ghost. So, see, the army supply is really in favor of the Terran. Now, there's one trick that Exodus has up his sleeve. And this is a very advanced trick, so I'd like you guys to pay attention very closely here. You see how little workers our friend Exodus has? Only 49 workers. Well, he's dealing with this drop with the Tempest, but he only has 40, well, even 46 now. And he's barely rebuilding them, which means that his army is going to be massive. And I think that's the real genius of this strategy, is that he's just macroing so poorly, he just completely forgets to build probes, is that his army is going to get so big, even though his army is garbage quality, as long as he gets a really good fight and a one-go fight, Yeah, maybe that's his key to victory here. While we see a couple of zealots being slowly warped in, decides to take out some rocks, as that definitely had priority over anything else in his life, like getting vision or producing probes or saturating his forward base. Really transitioning or spending some of that gas that he has in bank. Templar archives, of course, would be nice, as Templars cost 50 minerals and about 150 gas, so a very good gas sink. Now, this little squad without medevacs managed to sneak by the absolute wall of vision that Exodus has. Like, his complete vision at, well, at this part of the map, and he sees around the bases. So I'm very confused how this squad of little James Bonds managed to go in and snipe these two forges. It's very impressive. This Ward Runa really knows where the cameras are located. And even though Ward Runa has a bank of 5k, 2.5k, I can see a game at this level still get turned around as long as there's storm or some kind of splash. Sadly, there's no combat mechanic in this army. There's none. This army is an army that runs into your opponent's army and then you pray that you win. On top of that, this army is the worst upgraded army I've seen in my life. It's on 1-1, 17 minutes in game, without that much happening, honestly. He's been having money for the past 15 minutes basically. And here we go, the big A move. Tempest really being utilized on the range, trying to kite with them, forget to shoot instead. Zealots behind the main army, and I mean, this is 3-2 upgrades against 1-1. GG gets called and Ward Runa manages to win the game. So, quick little summary of the game. Early game was pretty good. We got ahead very far in worker count. Then our army composition was garbage. We forgot upgrades whatsoever. 0 map vision, lost 2 bases, 2 drops. Still decided to get no map vision. We had no clue what our opponent's army composition looked like. We continue to not counter our opponent's army composition. We continue to not change our army whatsoever from basically minute 4. We stayed on Immortal, Zealot, Stalker, couple of sentries. Exodus. I am starting to believe this might have nothing to do with imbalance. No, Mr. Exodus. I think this has to do with something else. You might be wondering what that? Well, let me tell you. You suck. Alright boys, that's gonna be it for today. I hope you enjoyed this beautiful video. If you did, feel free to leave a like in the subscription box below. And subscribe, leave a comment, all that good stuff. I will keep put a comment myself as well, which you guys can respond to. Everyone always seems to like that. So, see you boys in the next video tomorrow for an Alpha Star cast. Bye bye.